Creating an exploded view within an assembly in SOLIDWORKS is a relatively simple process. To start, right-click in on your active configuration and choose New Exploded View. And you'll also want to note you can only create one exploded view per configuration within SOLIDWORKS 2012 and older. SOLIDWORKS 2013 will allow you to create multiple exploded views within the same configuration. You'll notice this brings us into a selection box to select out components to explode. I'll go ahead and start with the rack and drag this up by the arrow. And I noticed a little bit of an issue with the explode steps if you're in perspective mode. If you take that out, it's a lot easier to move your components. So if you're having some issues where components are moving oddly when you try to create an exploded view, you'll want to turn perspective off. So once again, to start, I'm going to click on the rack and drag it up by that arrow. Within each explode step, you can move it or move any components in one direction. If I wanted to move this in another direction, I could create a second step. I also notice that this says chain. This will either say explode step or chain. If you choose this auto space option, it's going to try to create a chain of components and space them out accordingly. And if you do it with one component, it'll still say chain, but it'll work exactly the same as your other exploded steps. So once again, if I go back, turn off that selection, it'll show up as an exploded step. But these two are essentially the same thing. You can also choose out multiple components at a time and drag them out. And if we did want them to be spaced differently, we can choose that auto space option. And you can see that that spaces these two out automatically. You can also drag this slider and change that spacing. I'll go ahead and deselect that. And apply. Actually, I'll edit the step and deselect that. And that'll bring those two back together. Now, if I have subassemblies within the assembly, by default, this is going to select the entire subassembly and allow me to drag it. If you want to space these components out as well, you'll want to choose the Select Subassemblies Parts and choose out any of the parts that you want to drag and drag those out. You can do the same on the other side. Choose these two components. Once again, choose that auto space option and drag these out. Once I'm done with my exploded view, I can just click OK. And now I have an active exploded view. If you double click on that view, it'll bring you back into the default, and not the name of the configuration here, default, but the default settings for that specific configuration. And once again, if I double click this, it's going to explode the assembly back out. You can also right click in and say collapse. And we can also animate the collapse. So if you're creating something like assembly instructions, or just want a graphic that you can show, or a video you can show for the exploded view, you can save out this animation. You can also change the speed, choose to loop it, and have it go back and forth. You can also animate the explode as well. And the same is true. Save this out if you want, and you can change those same settings. The last option with exploded views is creating an exploded line sketch. And this will allow you to add route lines to the exploded steps. So if I wanted to select out a few of these faces, I can show that exploded line. And you can pretty much connect any items however you want. If you click on these arrows, it'll allow you to flip the way this is displayed. You can also reverse the paths through the option button and see what other alternate paths that you can add. But that's how you create an exploded view, as well as how you add route lines in. You'll see once you collapse the exploded view that it'll also hide out those route lines.